slept, who smiled through betrayal stitched into every seam. That evening, the sky hung low and bruised, swollen with rain clouds over Via Monte Napoleone. I was standing backstage at my own fashion show, the one that was supposed to save my career. The lights, the cameras, the champagne smiles. Everything glittered, yet I felt hollow inside. My ex-business partner Marco had nearly destroyed my label with his greed. Tonight was my second chance, the night Isabella. Couture would rise again, and then he arrived, Lorenzo De Luca. Every whisper in Milan knew his name, the Italian who owned half of Naples, and the silence of men who owed him everything. I'd seen him in magazines, sharp suits and sharper eyes, but that night when he entered the venue, he wasn't just another wealthy guest. He was gravity. People seemed to orbit around him, too afraid to look too long, too fascinated to look away. I caught his reflection in the mirror first. Tall, dark, impossibly composed, before his gaze found mine. It felt like time exhaled between us. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The world just paused. My assistant whispered, "That's Lorenzo De Luca. Be careful, Isa. Men like him don't watch fashion shows. They own the people in them." I should have listened. When the final model stepped onto the runway, wearing the white silk gown I'd spent months perfecting, the applause thundered. I felt tears burning in my eyes, relief, pride, exhaustion. And then I saw Lorenzo stand, his gaze locked on me from across the hall. He clapped once, twice, slowly, purposefully, and in that sound, there was both admiration and warning. Later, at the after-party, he approached me, surrounded by shadows disguised as bodyguards. "You design like a woman who's seen pain," he said in a low, accented voice that felt both tender and dangerous. "And you look like a man who causes it," I replied, surprising myself. He smiled. "Then perhaps we are mirrors." The air between us shifted. His cologne, expensive, dark, intoxicating, filled my lungs like a secret. Everyone else disappeared. I wanted to step away, but his presence held me captive. He tilted his head. "Let me guess, Signorina Moretti. You've been betrayed before." I froze. "Why would you say that?" "Because your designs, they bleed elegance, and only the betrayed understand beauty that hurts." He left me with that line, a glass of champagne half-touched, and a heart that wouldn't slow down. By midnight, I was alone on the balcony of the palazzo where the after-party was held. The city lights stretched like gold veins across the darkness, and I wondered if success always came with a shadow, and if his would one day fall over me. My phone buzzed. A message from Marco. "I hope you enjoyed your moment, because tomorrow, it's mine again." I didn't know then what he meant, but I would, soon. And when that betrayal unfolded, when I'd find myself sitting at a fancy restaurant across from Lorenzo De Luca, with the truth burning between us, I would remember this moment. The night when danger first smiled at me. The night when I should have walked away. But I didn't, because something in me, something foolish and fragile, wanted to know what love felt like when it came wrapped in sin. The next morning, Milan woke up wrapped in rain. I remember sitting by my studio window, sketchbook in hand, watching droplets race each other down the glass. The applause from last night still echoed faintly in my mind, but so did his voice. Only the betrayed understand beauty that hurts. Lorenzo De Luca. I told myself it was just a line, just another rich man's fascination with something he couldn't buy. But then came the message from unknown number text. Lunch. La Terrazza. 1 p.m. Don't say no. I don't handle rejection well. No name. No emoji. Just certainty. My stomach tightened. I shouldn't have gone. But curiosity, or maybe recklessness, has always been my favorite sin. La Terrazza was one of those restaurants that looked like a movie set. Crystal chandeliers, silver cutlery that caught the sun, and waiters who moved like silent choreography. The kind of place where money wasn't spent, it was performed. When I arrived, the hostess smiled nervously. "Signor De Luca is expecting you." He was already there, sitting by the window, the city sprawling behind him like a conquered kingdom. He looked up, that same unreadable gaze pinning me in place. "Isabella," he greeted, standing as if he'd been waiting for years, not minutes. "You came." "I shouldn't have," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He poured wine, deep red, smooth like blood under candlelight. "Then why did you?" "Because you make me feel seen," I wanted to say. But instead, "Because you asked." He smiled faintly. "I don't ask often." We talked. About fashion, about Milan, about art. His knowledge was sharp, cultured, unexpected. But every time I looked into his eyes, I saw something darker beneath, a quiet violence, restrained only by control. Finally, I asked, "Why me? Why this lunch?" He leaned forward slightly. "Because you looked at me like you already knew my sins. And didn't flinch." His words stole the air between us. I could feel people watching, whispering. The man across from me wasn't a secret. He was a headline. Every move of his was recorded somewhere, feared somewhere else. Then he said something that would stay with me forever. Every woman wants the fairy tale, Isabella, but in real life, the prince kills for his crown, and the princess learns to hide her scars under silk. I looked at him. And which one am I supposed to be? He smiled, slow, dangerous. Maybe both. After lunch, he insisted on driving me back to my studio. His car, black, sleek, expensive, smelled faintly of tobacco and storm. I remember how quiet it was, how his presence filled every corner even when he didn't speak. When we stopped outside my building, he didn't look at me right away. I know people are circling you, Isabella. Enemies wear familiar faces. Stay away from Marco. He's not done hurting you. My throat went dry. How do you know about Marco? Because I protect what I want. His hand brushed mine, only for a second. But it was enough to send electricity through my skin. Then he said softly, "And I want you." The air turned heavy, charged. His voice wasn't a confession, it was a command wrapped in desire. Before I could respond, he stepped out, came around, opened my door. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just don't look at anyone else that way again." And then he was gone, a shadow melting into the rain. That night I couldn't sleep. His words replayed again and again. Don't look at anyone else that way again. I told myself it was arrogance, possessiveness, a warning. But deep inside, it sounded like something I hadn't heard in years. A promise, started with silence. The kind of silence that lives between text messages that never arrive. Between breath and confession, between wanting and fearing. After that lunch, I told myself I'd never see him again. I buried myself in sketches, in fabrics, in deadlines that didn't matter. But Lorenzo De Luca had a way of existing in places he'd never been. In the taste of red wine, in the hum of expensive engines passing by, in the reflection of men wearing suits cut like his. And then, 3 nights later, he appeared again. I was locking up my studio late, the streets of Milan nearly empty. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city glowing like wet glass under the streetlights. When I turned to set the alarm, I heard it. The low growl of an engine. A black Maserati idled at the curb. The passenger window rolled down. "Working this late, Bella?" His voice was silk and smoke. I froze, heartbeat quickening. "Lorenzo, what are you doing here?" He smiled faintly, leaning an arm on the window frame. "I was in the neighborhood." "In this neighborhood?" I said, half amused, half suspicious. "There's nothing here but empty boutiques and bad coffee." "Then I came for the coffee," he said. "Or maybe for you." Before I could protest, he stepped out, dressed in a black coat, no tie this time, just effortless danger wrapped in control. "Let me drive you home. I have my car. I'm not asking, Isabella." Something in his tone, protective, commanding, made me hesitate. Against every reasonable instinct I got in. The ride was quiet. The city blurred by, light smearing across the windshield. Finally, he said, "Do you trust easily?" I looked at him. "No, good, don't start now." He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "I need you to understand something. I'm not the man people think I am. Then who are you?" He paused, long enough that I could hear my pulse in my ears. "Someone who's done terrible things, but never to someone I cared about." I swallowed hard. "And you care about me?" His hand tightened slightly on the steering wheel. More than I should. There it was. The admission that both thrilled and terrified me. The air inside the car grew heavy, charged with something unspoken. When he dropped me off, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he stepped out, walked me to my door. The air smelled like rain and night flowers. "I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow," he said. "People you should meet. Powerful people. Come as my guest." I hesitated. "Why me?" "Because when you walk into a room," he said quietly, "men forget their loyalties. And I need that." I stared at him, unsure whether to feel flattered or frightened. "So you want me to be your distraction?" He smiled faintly. "No, Isabella. I want you to be my reminder that something pure still exists in this world." And then, before I could speak, he brushed his thumb against my cheek. Gentle, deliberate, like a signature. "Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Don't be late." He turned and left, the sound of his car disappearing into the night like a heartbeat fading. Inside my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed, heart racing. I knew I should stay away. I knew the stories about him, the missing men, the silent threats, the way entire businesses folded overnight after crossing him. But there was something deeper pulling me toward him. Something tragic and inevitable, the kind of pull that doesn't end well for women like me. I touched my cheek where his hand had been and whispered to myself, "You're falling, Isabella. And this time, there's no net beneath you." By the next evening, Milan felt different. Slower, heavier, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The invitation had come by courier that morning. Thick cream paper, gold-embossed letters, no address, only a driver's number. No words of affection. No promises. Just Lorenzo De Luca request your presence. It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. I stood before my mirror, staring at the woman in the reflection, the one wearing a black silk gown that clung like confession. I pinned my hair up, slid on red lipstick, and told myself this was business. But my trembling hands betrayed me. The car that arrived was as silent as sin. The driver, a man built like a wall, opened the door without a word. Through the tinted glass, I watched Milan fade, the lights thinning, the streets turning narrow and quiet until the city gave way to countryside. Half an hour later, the villa appeared, marble gates, iron roses curling along the fence, guards in tailored suits. When I stepped out, the air smelled of cypress and money. Somewhere inside, a violin played, slow, deliberate, almost mournful. A butler led me through a long corridor lined with portraits of men, who all had Lorenzo's eyes. At the end stood double doors, carved with lions, and there he was. Lorenzo looked different tonight, softer somehow, yet more dangerous. A dark three-piece suit, no tie, a single diamond pin on his lapel. He turned when I entered, his gaze traveling over me like a question he'd already decided the answer to. Isabella. He said quietly. You came. I almost didn't. Then I would have sent for you. The way he said it wasn't arrogance, it was inevitability. He took my hand, brushed his lips across it, and I felt every nerve in my body ignite. Stay close to me tonight, he murmured. These people smile for power, not pleasure. The dining hall glittered like a cathedral built for greed. 12 guests sat around a glass table that seemed to float on nothing, men in tailored suits, women dripping in jewels, laughter too polished to be real. They all looked at Lorenzo with reverence, or fear. And then, at me, whispers rippled. Who is she? Why her? Another one of his distractions? He didn't introduce me as a date. He introduced me as his designer, but the way his hand rested lightly on the small of my back said otherwise. I tried to breathe, to smile, to survive the scrutiny. The man seated across, tall, blonde, eyes like ice, lifted his glass. Ah, the famous Isabella Moretti, the artist behind last week's show. I heard it was magnificent. Thank you, I managed. He smirked. Tell me, does Lorenzo pay in cash or diamonds? The table chuckled. Lorenzo didn't. He leaned forward, voice calm. Careful, Ricardo. You know how I feel about people putting prices on things I value? The room fell silent. The blonde man lowered his eyes. My pulse pounded. I'd just witnessed a threat disguised as civility. Lorenzo turned to me, his tone soft again. See, business can be impolite. I forced a smile, but my hands trembled under the tablecloth. This was his world, where every sentence was a chess move, every compliment a blade. After dinner, he led me to the terrace. The lake shimmered below, black glass under the moon. He poured champagne, handed me a flute, and said nothing for a while. Then softly, does my world scare you? I met his eyes. It should. But it doesn't. Maybe that's the problem. He smiled, the kind of smile that held 1,000 regrets. You see danger and call it beauty, and you see beauty and call it possession, I whispered back. He looked away, jaw tightening. Perhaps. But understand something, Isabella. When I choose to protect someone, it isn't gentle. It's absolute. My heart hammered. Protect me from what? He turned, the night wind catching his voice. From the people who are already trying to hurt you. And from yourself, if I must. The music from inside swelled, drowning the silence between us. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he took my glass, set it aside, and said only, tomorrow you'll hear things. Don't believe them. And before I could reply, he pressed a kiss against my forehead. Tender, final, as if sealing a warning. That night, when I finally returned home, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside, a single photograph. Me and Lorenzo standing on the terrace, taken from a distance. On the back, one line written in ink, he'll ruin you like he ruined me. I didn't sleep. The photograph lay on my nightstand under the weak glow of my bedside lamp, its edges curling like something alive. Someone had followed us. Someone wanted me to know they had. When I finally picked it up again, the handwriting on the back looked rushed, almost desperate. He'll ruin you, like he ruined me. The me haunted me most. A woman's hand, I was sure of it. The loops elegant, practiced, the kind of handwriting that once signed love letters. I told myself to ignore it, to throw it away, but I couldn't, because a part of me already believed it. Morning arrived with cold light and colder news. Every fashion blog in Milan carried the same headline. Isabella Moretti's secret investor revealed. Lorenzo De Luca. It was a lie. He hadn't invested in me, not officially. But in this city, rumors don't need truth. They only need oxygen. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. By 3, my showroom's landlord called. Your rent's been paid, signorina. 3 months in advance. Cash. My stomach turned. There was only one man who would do that. When I finally reached Lorenzo, he answered on the first ring. Don't thank me, he said before I could speak. I simply removed obstacles. You also remove my credibility, I snapped. Let the vultures talk. Their noise keeps them from seeing the real danger. And what danger is that? A pause, then quiet as a confession. Someone is watching you. I almost laughed. You think I don't know that? I found a photograph under my door. His tone changed instantly, lower, sharper. Describe it, I did. The silence on the other end felt like an earthquake waiting to happen. Burn it, he said finally. And stay inside tonight. The line went dead. I didn't burn it. Instead, I slipped the photograph into the sketchbook where I kept designs I never showed anyone. The darker ones, the dresses made of sorrow and shadow. If Lorenzo had secrets, then so did I. By evening, the city rain returned, thin and relentless. I sat by my window, sketching without purpose. Every stroke of pencil felt like an echo of his voice. Burn it. Stay inside. But the truth is, I couldn't stay still. I needed to understand who wrote that warning, so I went out. The address came from my assistant, Sophia. She'd heard whispers at an industry party. Someone who used to be close to him, she said. A model named Valentina Russo disappeared 2 years ago after a show in Venice. Some say she was with Lorenzo before you. The name clung to me all the way to the old apartment complex near the Navigli canals. When I reached the door, it was half open. Dust everywhere. No sign of life. But on the floor, I found another photograph. Old, faded. Lorenzo and a woman with long auburn hair. Her smile looked familiar. She was wearing a dress from one of my earliest collections, and written on the back, the same ink, the same hand. He loves beautifully. Until it destroys you. That night, when I returned home, a car was already waiting outside my building. Lorenzo stepped out, rain soaking his shoulders. He looked furious and afraid. Where were you? Finding the truth, I said. He closed the distance between us, his hand catching my wrist. You don't look for truth in my world, Isabella. You survive it. I stared at him. Did you love her? He didn't answer. His jaw clenched. His eyes said everything. Tell me, Lorenzo. Finally, he whispered. I tried to. But loving me was the last thing she ever did. Lightning cracked behind him, white and merciless. In that flash, I saw the outline of a man who'd lost too much, who lived with ghosts he couldn't bury, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to save him or run. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It drummed against the windows of my studio like impatient fingers, and every strike of thunder felt closer than the last. Sketches covered the floor, half-finished gowns, shadows of ideas I couldn't complete. Every design looked the same now. Black silk, sharp lines, the echo of a man I couldn't forget. I told myself I was done with him, that I'd drawn the line at the truth he wouldn't tell. But lines blur easily when loneliness begins to whisper. It was close to midnight when I heard the knock. 3 slow taps, deliberate, familiar. I froze, heart catching between beats. When I opened the door, he was there, rain clinging to his hair, shirt undone at the throat, eyes darker than the night behind him. Lorenzo. He didn't wait for permission. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a quiet finality. Water pooled around his shoes. The air shifted, heavy with storm and something unspoken. You shouldn't be here, I said. I could say the same about you going to that apartment, he replied, voice low, controlled. So you were following me? He met my gaze. I was protecting you. By keeping secrets? I snapped. By letting me walk into someone else's tragedy? His jaw tightened. You think I wanted you to see that? To dig through the ashes of my mistakes? Then tell me, I shouted. Tell me who she was. Tell me what you did to her. Silence. Only the rain answered. Finally he spoke, softer. Valentina. She was light. Too much of it. And I was darkness. When she tried to leave, my enemies used her to reach me. She thought she could save me by disappearing. He looked away. They made sure she never could. I felt the room tilt, the floor slipping from beneath my feet. Are you saying, she's dead because of me? He cut in, voice breaking on the last word. Because I believed I could keep her close and keep her safe. I was wrong. I wanted to hate him, but grief softened every edge of his anger. He wasn't confessing to a crime. He was confessing to guilt that had lived too long. Why tell me now? I whispered. Because the same men who took her life are circling you, he said. And I won't lose another woman. He stopped himself, but the unfinished sentence lingered between us. My throat tightened. You what? He stepped closer, the distance between us shrinking to a breath. His hand rose, hesitant, and brushed a strand of wet hair from my cheek. I care for you, Isabella. That's my curse. For a moment, the storm outside vanished. There was only the warmth of his palm, the tremor in his voice, the heartbeat that wasn't mine pounding in my ears. I should have stepped back. Instead, I leaned in. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was raw, desperate. 2 people trying to erase everything they knew would destroy them. His hands framed my face. Mine clung to his coat like an anchor in the flood. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against mine. This is a mistake, I whispered. I know, he said, and I'll make it again. He kissed me once more, brief, aching, before stepping back. Lock your doors tonight. Trust no one who says they work for me. Then he turned and left, leaving the door half open, the rain spilling inside. I stood there long after his car disappeared, the taste of his confession still on my lips, and understood what love meant in Lorenzo's world. It wasn't safety. It was surrender. The rain finally stopped by dawn. I hadn't slept. The sketches on my table were soaked with tears and coffee stains, my mind replaying every word Lorenzo said and didn't say. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him walking away, and behind him, the ghost of a woman named Valentina. By morning, the city was washed clean, the streets gleaming like they'd forgotten what pain looked like. I made myself believe I could do the same, that all I needed was work, fabric, scissors, and silence. I turned up the music in my studio, soft jazz, and let the rhythm cover the hollow noise in my head. Pins between my lips, measuring tape around my neck, I began cutting the silk for a new design. Deep blue, smooth, strong, the color of the sea before a storm. Something new, I whispered to myself. Something not about him. For the first time in days, I almost smiled. Almost. The bell over the door chimed. I froze. No one should have been here. I hadn't unlocked the front entrance yet. Hello? Silence. I walked toward the sound, scissors still in my hand, heart beginning to race. The display window was half covered by morning fog. My reflection looked pale, hollow-eyed, fragile. No movement outside, I exhaled. Maybe the wind, then I saw it. A faint smear of mud across the floor by the back door. Fresh, wet, human. My throat tightened. Luca? I called. My assistant hadn't been in for 2 days, but I needed to hear my own voice sound brave. No answer. The silence felt heavier now. Not empty, watching. I took a slow step back toward my work table, reaching for my phone. It wasn't there. Then the air shifted, the faintest sound of fabric brushing against metal. Someone was inside. I turned sharply and caught a glimpse. A man's shadow, tall, moving between racks of gowns. Not Lorenzo, too thin. Too quiet, who's there? I said louder this time. The shadow froze, then a voice, low, unfamiliar, accented. You shouldn't have opened that box. Before I could react, a hand struck the lights. Darkness swallowed the room. My breath came fast. I dropped the scissors, stumbled backward. The only sound was rainwater dripping from his coat onto the wooden floor. I felt him move closer, unseen but near enough that I could smell the faint trace of cigarettes and salt. Tell your lover, he whispered. Some ghosts don't stay buried. A crash, glass exploding. I ducked instinctively, covering my face. When I looked up again, he was gone. The window shattered, curtains whipping in the wind. My body trembled, but I forced myself to move. I grabbed the phone from under a pile of fabric and dialed Lorenzo's number. No answer. Then a text buzzed in. Unknown number. 1 line only. You were warned not to look at him again. I sank to the floor, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. Someone wanted to destroy both of us, and they were done warning. I didn't hear his car arrive. The sound of the engine was swallowed by the wind, the city, and the rain still dripping from the cracked window. All I knew was the sudden weight in the room, heavy, suffocating, inevitable. Then I felt it. His presence. Isabella. The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. I spun around. There he was. Lorenzo De Luca, wet coat clinging to his shoulders, eyes darker than the storm outside, jaw tight as though holding back a hurricane. You're alive, he said. The words more of a statement than a question. I tried to answer. My lips trembled. Nothing came out. He crossed the room in 3 steps, hands gripping my shoulders. Talk to me. Did anyone touch you? I shook my head. No, I don't think so. But I stopped. The words died in my throat. How could I explain the shadow? The whisper? The shattered glass? His eyes narrowed. Somebody was inside. Did they leave anything? I handed him the phone. He read the message, then crushed it in his palm as though erasing it could erase the threat. Instead, the screen's fragments cut his knuckles. He didn't flinch. You should never have come alone, he said, voice low, dangerous. I wanted to argue, to tell him I could protect myself. But when he looked at me, that storm in his gaze held a truth I couldn't deny. I wasn't safe. Not from the world, not from him. He moved to the broken window, scanning the street below, his posture tense, predatory. I told you not to look at anyone else, he muttered. I flinched. The words weren't just jealousy, they were warning and promise all at once. He turned back, and for a moment, I saw the man I had kissed just 2 nights ago, the one who'd whispered confessions of guilt and desire. Then the mask fell away, and I saw the monster underneath. Do you understand? He asked. The people who follow me, the ones who want to hurt you, they don't play by rules. And neither do I. I nodded, too afraid to speak. His hands found mine, gripping gently this time, grounding me. I won't let them take you, he whispered. And if they try, he didn't finish. I didn't need him to. The weight of him filled the room, suffocating and protective all at once. The storm outside seemed to pale in comparison to the one he carried inside. I wanted to step back, to flee, but I couldn't. Even as fear wrapped around my ribs, a dangerous part of me leaned into him. A part that wanted to surrender, knowing the cost could be everything. He pulled me into his arms, slow, deliberate, and I let myself rest there for a heartbeat too long, listening to his ragged breathing. The broken glass at our feet shimmered like tiny stars, reminders of how fragile we were, and how dangerous love could become. Finally, he released me, stepping back just enough to let me breathe. Lock every door, barricade every window. I want cameras everywhere by tonight, he ordered. And Isabella? I swallowed. Yes? You belong nowhere else tonight. Except here. And with that he left, not gone but present. Even as I watched him vanish into the shadows, I felt his weight on me, heavy as destiny. Somewhere between fear and desire, I realized I had already crossed a line I could never return from. The day dawned gray, the sun hiding behind heavy clouds, as if it too feared what was coming. I forced myself to open the studio, to pretend the night's terror was behind me, but every corner, every folded dress, every pinned sketch reminded me of the shattered glass, the whisper, the shadow I hadn't seen. I told myself I was safe. Lorenzo had said it. He had promised protection. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't just outside. It was inside, somewhere close. Mafia arrived mid-morning, cheerful as always, clutching a tray of espresso. I brought you fuel, she said brightly, as if the world hadn't cracked open around us. I forced a smile. Thanks. Her eyes lingered on my face, on the shadows under my eyes, on the way my hands shook when I touched a sketch. You didn't sleep? She asked softly. I had things to think about, I murmured, not wanting to explain. She nodded, but I caught the hesitation in her glance. By noon I was sewing again, the rhythm of the needle almost comforting. And then it happened. The first betrayal, subtle at first, almost invisible. A message on my phone from Marco. Nice collection, Isa. I hear someone's taking care of your little problems for you. Don't get too comfortable. I felt the blood drain from my face. How did he know about last night? The truth hit me like ice. Someone I trusted, someone I thought was neutral, had betrayed me. Sophia noticed my pale face. Is everything... I cut her off, voice sharp, trembling. No, everything is not fine. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. Every client that came through the door seemed suspicious. Every sound in the studio, the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of fabric, set my nerves on edge. I kept glancing at the door, imagining shadows, intruders, spies, and the photograph, still tucked under my sketchbook, seemed to whisper. Some ghosts don't stay buried. By evening, I was exhausted, trembling from adrenaline and fear. I locked every door, checked every window, double-checked the alarms, but I knew it wasn't enough. Not for him. Not for Lorenzo. Because the betrayal wasn't just a stranger's attack. It was personal, and I realized, with a shiver that ran down my spine, that whoever had sent that first warning, whoever had stepped inside my studio last night, knew everything about me. They knew where I slept. They knew what I wore. They knew the exact moment I would feel safe, and if Lorenzo hadn't been there, I wouldn't have survived the night. I sank to the floor by my desk, clutching the photograph to my chest. Tears blurred the edges. Mixing with sweat and ink, I whispered into the emptiness, please, don't let him get hurt because of me. Don't let me ruin everything. The room was silent. But I knew. The danger was far from over. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was waiting for me to make a mistake. Sleep had become impossible. Each hour stretched endlessly, filled with imagined footsteps, whispered threats, and the memory of Lorenzo's warning. I tried to convince myself that the morning would bring clarity, that light would make everything easier. It didn't. Sophia arrived again, cheerful and unsuspecting. She noticed my pale face and the shadows under my eyes. Isabella, you look like hell, she said softly. I forced a small, bitter laugh. It's nothing, just deadlines. But I couldn't lie. Not to myself. Not anymore. I needed answers, and deep down, I already feared where those answers would lead. By mid-morning, a familiar presence entered the studio. Marco. My heart froze. He smiled, the same arrogant, careless smile that had ruined me months ago. Ah, Isa, he said casually, glancing around. Busy, I see. Beautiful designs as always. I gritted my teeth. What are you doing here? He leaned against the table, watching me like a cat stalking a mouse. I just like to keep an eye on things. Something in the way he said it, in the smug satisfaction on his face, made my stomach twist. I realized the truth before he spoke another word. He's the one who betrayed me. You're the one sending the messages. The warnings, the threats, I said, my voice rising despite myself. He laughed, soft, mocking, cruel. Ah, Isabella, you're quick, but yes, let's call it a friendly reminder, a nudge. You're playing in a dangerous game now. Don't forget who's really pulling the strings. I wanted to lash out, to strike him, but my hands trembled too much. I had no proof, only suspicion, only the pulse of fear pounding in my veins. As Marco leaned closer, his breath hot, I felt trapped, cornered. And then I remembered Lorenzo. I imagined him standing outside, silent and watching, the storm of his presence waiting to erupt. It gave me courage, fragile, trembling courage, enough to stand tall. You think I'm afraid of you? I hissed. You think you can control me? Marco smirked. Not afraid yet, but you will be, once he knows you've been talking to me, Isabella. I swallowed hard. Once who knows? I asked, my voice low and trembling. Marco straightened, his smirk widening. Lorenzo De Luca. He doesn't forgive mistakes, Isa, and he never forgets who betrayed him. My blood ran cold. I felt the walls of my studio close in. Every glance at the shattered glass from last night, every whisper in the dark, every warning. It all made sense, and for the first time I realized something terrifying. The betrayal wasn't just about me. It was about him. Marco left with a casual wave like nothing had happened. But I knew better. The air still carried the echo of his laughter, mocking and threatening. I sank to the floor, clutching the photograph, clutching the sketches. I whispered into the empty studio. Please, don't let him find out before I can fix this, please. The room was silent, but the knowledge pressed against me like a living thing. Some betrayals don't stay hidden. And in that silence, I knew I was running out of time. The next morning, Milan felt smaller. Every shadow seemed to follow me, every passerby a potential threat. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, but deep in my chest, a cold, sharp knowledge had taken root. Marco had crossed the line. I was sewing quietly, forcing my hands to move as if the fabric could absorb my fear. The sound of my needle against silk was the only thing grounding me. Until I heard it, a knock, loud, demanding, impossible to ignore. I froze. No one should be here. Not after yesterday. The door swung open before I could react. And there he was, Lorenzo, tall, imposing, dark suit clinging to him like armor, his hair damp, his eyes storm gray and unreadable. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, letting the air between us thicken with tension. Lorenzo. My voice was barely a whisper. He didn't move toward me, not yet. He scanned the room, eyes narrowing at every misplaced sketch, every fallen pin. And then he saw it, the broken glass from last night, still faintly glinting in the morning light. His jaw tightened. My warning, he said, voice low and dangerous, was not for decoration. I swallowed hard. It wasn't anyone's fault. He cut me off with a look so sharp it felt like a physical blow. Don't lie to me, Isabella. I dropped my gaze, shame burning. I think Marco, at the name, his eyes flared with a storm I had never seen before. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The sheer weight of his presence crushed the room, made the walls tremble. You think someone betrays you in my world and gets away with it? He hissed. The air vibrated around his words, like thunder in a distant valley. I don't forgive mistakes, and I don't tolerate betrayal. I trembled. I wanted to run, but a part of me, the part that had leaned into him despite fear, the part that had kissed him despite knowing the danger, stayed, because even in anger, he was magnetic. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the pulse of him against my own. My enemies tried to touch you, he whispered, and I will make them regret it. I felt a shiver that was part fear, part desire. You're going to? I asked, voice catching. His lips brushed my temple. A promise, a threat, a confession. Yes, he said softly. I'll destroy anyone who dares to harm you. And if I have to, I'll destroy them completely. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sink into his arms and never let go, but I only managed to whisper, be careful. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing away the tremor I could no longer hide. I am careful, he said, voice low, intimate. But some things, some people, require more than caution. The storm in his eyes mirrored the storm in the sky outside, and for the first time I realized love in his world wasn't gentle. It wasn't safe. It was fire, and I was standing too close. I couldn't focus. Every stitch of silk I tried to sew seemed to dissolve beneath my hands, as if the fabric itself sensed the storm raging around me. The morning light had grown heavy with dread, pressing through the tall studio windows like a silent witness to my fear. I hadn't heard from Lorenzo since that morning, but I knew, somehow, he was already moving. Tracking Marco, watching, waiting. The phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering, fear curling around my throat. Isabella? The voice was low, controlled, familiar. I don't like surprises, I said, voice trembling. You should, he replied. Some people are more dangerous than you realize. Marco isn't the only one playing tonight. Stay inside, it was him. Even through the phone, his presence weighed down the room. I closed my eyes. I can't just hide. You can't just fight alone either, he said sharply. I'll handle him, but if anything happens to you, his voice dropped to a whisper. I will find you, Isabella, and no one will be left standing. I shivered, clutching the receiver. The threat was clear, the promise sharper, and somehow, despite everything, my chest tightened with longing. Hours later, I peeked through the blinds. The street outside was quiet, too quiet. Every shadow seemed elongated, every pedestrian a potential spy. My hands trembled as I drew, sketches turning into sharp, dangerous designs. Black silk, red lining, cuts that mirrored the fear in my chest. The phone buzzed again. A text this time. Do not trust anyone today, even those who seem loyal. I swallowed hard. It was true. Every smile, every friendly gesture suddenly felt like a trap. Even Sophia's cheerful presence couldn't mask my paranoia. By evening, I had barricaded the studio doors, locked every window, and moved the heavier furniture against them. I tried to convince myself this was enough. But deep down I knew better. Marco, Lorenzo, and the unseen enemies. They were playing a game I didn't understand yet, and I was caught in the middle. The sun set behind the rooftops of Milan, casting the studio in shades of gray and blood red. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, clutching the photograph once more. Every line on Valentina's face, every whisper from the past, pressed against me like a warning. Some loves destroy before they save. And suddenly, I understood. Lorenzo's world was not just dangerous, it was lethal. And I was falling deeper into it. Night fell over Milan like a velvet trap. The city lights shimmered on wet cobblestones, but even their glow felt cold and distant. I sat by my window, knees drawn to my chest, listening to every creak, every distant car, every whisper of the wind. I knew it wasn't enough. I knew he would come, Lorenzo. And when he did, it wasn't subtle. The sound of a car engine, low and precise, rolled up the street. My breath caught. The engine stopped. Then silence. I didn't move. The knock at my door came almost instantly. Sharp, commanding. Isabella, his voice. Low, dangerous, close. I rushed to the door, heart hammering. When I opened it, he was there. Rain dripping from his coat, hair wet, eyes like storm clouds ready to break. I told you to stay inside, he said, almost growling. I did, I whispered, trembling. You did, he replied, stepping inside. But the danger doesn't wait, and neither do I. He scanned the studio with piercing intensity, and I watched him like a moth drawn to fire. I found him, he said suddenly. Marco won't be alive by morning if I decide it. And if he touches you again? His voice broke off, low, intimate, heavy with warning. I shivered. Lorenzo, be careful. I am careful, he said, voice tight with control and desire. But some people require more than caution. Then he moved closer. I could feel the heat of him, the weight of him, the storm that followed wherever he went. Why do you let yourself be in danger? He asked softly, almost pleading. Because I can't run from this, I admitted. From you. From what we are. He shook his head, exasperated, almost a whisper of fury. You don't survive alone, Isabella. Not in this world. And I won't let you. His hands found mine, thumb brushing over my knuckles. The proximity made my chest tighten, my pulse race. I don't want you to destroy yourself. For me, I said. His lips brushed my temple, a promise and a warning. You're already in the fire, Isabella, he murmured, and I can't protect you from it. Not completely, but I will try. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside the studio. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying and irresistible. Lorenzo De Luca didn't just protect me. He consumed me. And no matter how much I wanted to run, I couldn't escape him, or the danger that came with him. The night was thick, pressing against the studio walls like a living thing. I couldn't stop thinking about Lorenzo, about the storm in his eyes, the promise of wrath he carried, and now, Marco. The man who had betrayed me, who had trespassed into my life, who had whispered threats through shadows and glass. I couldn't sit still. Every noise outside made me jump. Every shadow felt like a hand reaching for me. Then the phone rang. I almost didn't pick it up. But the voice on the other end was calm, commanding, entirely Lorenzo. He's near, he said. Who? I whispered. Marco. He thinks he can play games. He thinks he can touch you. His voice was steady, but I could hear the underlying storm, a fury I had never heard so clearly before. I'm coming for him, stay put. No one leaves your side tonight. My chest tightened. I knew what he meant. He wasn't coming for a warning. He was coming for blood. Minutes later he arrived, wet from the rain, every movement precise, controlled, predatory. He didn't knock. He didn't smile. He only scanned the room, then turned his gaze on me. "Stay close," he ordered, voice low. I obeyed instantly. I didn't want to disobey, and a part of me didn't want to. The car ride was silent except for the soft hum of the engine. Lorenzo drove fast but careful, navigating Milan's dark streets like he owned every shadow. When we arrived at Marco's apartment, the air seemed to thicken, charged with tension. He didn't speak as he pushed the door open. I stayed behind him, heart hammering, fingers clutching his coat. And then I saw Marco. He was leaning against the wall, smirking, as if he knew he was about to be punished. "You're too late, DeLuca," he said casually. "I already sent her a warning. Consider it a gift." Lorenzo's jaw tightened, his hands flexed. I could feel the storm building before it struck. "You touched her," he said quietly, each word sharp as a knife. Marco laughed. "And what are you going to do about it?" "You can't touch me." "Not yet." Lorenzo's hand shot forward in a blur. I gasped. In a heartbeat, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. Every ounce of his fury radiated outward like heat from a fire. I didn't understand everything he did. All I knew was that by the time it was over, Marco was sprawled on the floor, fear etched on his face, every inch of arrogance gone. Lorenzo turned to me, voice low, almost gentle. "Do you see now? You are never safe alone. Not from them, not from me." I swallowed hard, heart pounding. "Yes," I whispered. "I understand." His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, enough for me to see the man behind the monster. Then the mask returned, and he stepped back into the shadow, leaving me trembling, terrified, exhilarated, and impossibly drawn to him. The city smelled of rain and asphalt as we drove back to my studio. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The images of Marco on the floor, the fear in his eyes, the absolute control in Lorenzo's, haunted me. I had witnessed power and it terrified me. And yet, a part of me couldn't stop trembling in a different way. He glanced at me once, briefly, from the corner of his eyes. "You should never see that side of me again," he said softly, almost regretfully. "But you did. And now," his gaze hardened, "now you know the price of crossing me." I swallowed hard. "Yes," I whispered. The words sounded weak, but they carried the weight of understanding. Back at the studio, I locked every door again, checking each window, each bolt. Lorenzo's presence lingered like smoke, though he had left the room. I sat down, trembling, and finally allowed myself to breathe. My sketches lay around me, but they felt different now, sharp, dangerous, reflecting the storm I had just survived. Every line seemed to echo him. Every fold of fabric carried the memory of his hands, his heat, his wrath. And then it hit me. The fear I felt was inseparable from desire. The danger he brought into my life was terrifying, yes, but also intoxicating. I wanted him, and I feared that wanting him meant giving him everything, including my heart. I sank to the floor, clutching the photograph, the sketches, the remnants of my safe life. I whispered into the emptiness, "Lorenzo, what have you done to me?" The studio remained silent, but I felt the truth in my chest. There was no going back. Not now, not ever. Night fell again, and for the first time, I realized that survival wasn't just about avoiding Marco or his shadows. It was about surviving Lorenzo's world, a world where love was fire, and crossing him was death. And somewhere deep inside, I wondered if I was already consumed. The night felt heavier than ever. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts a storm I could not calm. Every moment with Lorenzo replayed in my mind, the heat of his hands, the storm in his eyes, the terrifying power he wielded so effortlessly. And yet, it wasn't fear alone that gripped me. It was something darker, something intoxicating. I tried to focus on my work. Sketches, fabric, designs, anything to anchor myself in the normal world. But every fold of silk, every line of a dress reminded me of him, of his hands, his voice, the way he could make me feel safe and terrified at the same time. I whispered to myself, "This is dangerous." And yet I can't stop thinking about him. The phone buzzed. A message from Lorenzo. "Sleep. Tomorrow we act. You must be ready. Trust no one," I shivered. Even his words carried weight. Threat, promise, and longing all at once. I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just drawn to him. I was already caught in his orbit. And in this world, orbiting him meant danger, but also desire I couldn't resist. Morning arrived gray and silent. I went to the studio, heart heavy, mind restless. Every sound made me jump, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of the street, the rustle of fabric against metal. I knew the enemy could be anywhere, and yet, the thought of Lorenzo gave me courage. He had confronted Marco. He had shown me what it meant to survive, but he had also shown me something else, that I could want him, even when fear pulsed through my veins. Hours passed in tense anticipation. Then, at the studio door, I heard the softest knock. I froze. My heart leapt. Was it him? Or another threat? I opened it slowly. It was Sophia. "Isabella, you need to be careful," she whispered. "I know," I said, voice low, trembling. "But I can't stop. Not now." Even I could feel how reckless that sounded. That night, I found myself at the window again, staring at the dark streets. I whispered into the emptiness. "Lorenzo, if I survive this, I will never be the same, and I'm afraid I don't want to be." The wind rattled the window panes, and somewhere in the shadows I felt it. The danger. The forbidden pull. The fire that Lorenzo brought into my life. I understood the truth. Terrifying and intoxicating. Love in his world was not gentle. It was a storm, and I was already standing in the middle of it. Night deepened, wrapping the city in a quiet that felt almost suffocating. I lay on my bed, the sheets tangled around me like the threads of my own racing thoughts. Every second replayed him, Lorenzo, his eyes storm gray, his presence overwhelming, and the way he could make me feel both utterly safe and completely exposed. I pressed my palms to my face. Why did he haunt me so? Why did every touch, every whispered word linger in my blood like fire? It wasn't just desire, it was danger. And I couldn't tell where the fear ended and the longing began. I tried to immerse myself in work. Fabric, sketches, designs. My sanctuary. Yet every stroke of silk beneath my fingers reminded me of him, the way his hands might glide across my skin, the sharpness of his jaw, the heat that followed him everywhere. Even the scissors in my hand felt heavy with anticipation, as if they too carried his presence. I whispered into the dark, "This is madness. I should run. I should stay away." But my lips trembled when I spoke, betraying the truth. I didn't want to run. I wanted him, and that frightened me more than any threat outside these walls. Hours passed slowly. I wandered the studio, restless. The phone buzzed again. A message from Lorenzo, simple, commanding. "Tonight we act. Be ready. Trust no one." I shivered at the words. Even in text, he radiated danger, promise, and obsession. I realized the terrifying truth. I wasn't just drawn to him. I was ensnared in his orbit. And in this world, his world. Orbiting him meant that desire and peril were inseparable. I paced the room, heart racing. I thought of Marco, of last night, of the betrayal that had almost cost me everything. But Lorenzo, he had confronted that danger. He had shown me power, protection, and passion, all in one. And now, I craved it, even as I feared it. When night finally fell, I sat at the window again, staring into the empty streets. The city seemed indifferent, but I wasn't. Every shadow made me flinch. Every whisper of wind felt like a warning, and yet, somewhere deep in my chest, a dangerous warmth spread. I pressed my forehead to the glass, whispering his name, Lorenzo. If I survive this, I will never be the same, and I don't think I want to be. The wind rattled the window panes as if agreeing. I felt the fire of him, even miles away, searing through me. The thrill, the fear, the forbidden pull. Love in his world wasn't safe. It wasn't gentle. It was a storm, and I was already caught in the center of it, trembling, burning, and utterly unable to escape. The night pressed against my skin like a living thing, wrapping the city in silence that felt almost suffocating. I lay on my bed, tangled in the sheets, my mind unable to rest. Every memory of him consumed me. The storm in his eyes, the way his presence filled a room so completely that it erased everything else. Even now, hours after the confrontation, with Marco, I could still feel his heat, his power, lingering against my skin like a phantom touch. I pressed my palms to my face, trying to breathe through the panic that surged with every thought of him. Why did he haunt me so completely? Why did I feel drawn to danger the way a moth is drawn to flame? I couldn't tell where the fear ended and the longing began. It had become impossible to separate the two. I feared him, feared his wrath, his power, the darkness he carried. And yet, in the same heartbeat, I ached for him. I moved to my studio, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of work. Fabric, sketches, scissors, my sanctuary. But every fold of silk, every stroke of pencil reminded me of him. I imagined his hands gliding across the smoothness of my designs, across my skin. The scissors in my hand felt heavy, almost alive, as if charged with his presence. I whispered, into the empty room, my voice trembling. This is madness. I should run. I should stay away. But the confession escaped my lips anyway. I don't want to run. I want him, and that terrifies me. The hours stretched on, each one longer than the last. The studio felt smaller, the shadows deeper. My phone buzzed again. A message from Lorenzo. Tonight, we act. Be ready. Trust no one. Even in text, his words carried his weight. Danger, obsession, and promise all at once. I shivered, realizing the horrifying truth. I was ensnared in his world. And in this world, desire and danger were inseparable. My chest ached with longing I couldn't voice. I thought of his hands, the sharp line of his jaw, the dangerous warmth that followed him everywhere. And I knew, if I let myself, I could give into it completely. I could surrender, even if it meant losing all sense of safety, reason, and control. I walked to the window, staring out at the empty streets below. The wind whispered through the city, carrying a chill that seemed almost sentient. I pressed my forehead to the glass, whispering his name like a prayer. Lorenzo, if I survive this, I will never be the same. And I don't think I want to be. The fire of him burned through me, intoxicating, terrifying, impossible to resist. Even miles away, even in silence, he occupied every corner of my mind, every pulse of my heart. I imagined his hands on me, protective, possessive, commanding, and the thought sent a shiver down my spine. Fear and desire had become one, pain and longing indistinguishable. Love in his world was not safe. It was a storm. It was fire, and I was standing right in the middle of it, trembling, burning, and utterly unable to escape. Even as the night deepened, I understood the truth. I was his. Not by choice, not by force, but by the pull of something stronger than fear or reason. I was caught in the orbit of a man who could destroy the world for me, and for whom I would risk my own heart without hesitation. And I feared and craved every second of it. The city was quieter than usual, but I didn't believe in quiet anymore. Not after Marco, not after last night, not after Lorenzo. Every shadow, every creak of the building made my heart leap as if warning me that danger was still close, still waiting. And yet my mind didn't focus on the threat. It focused on him. On Lorenzo, on the way he had burned through my world and left me raw, trembling, aching with a desire I couldn't name. I tried to busy myself with work, to sketch, to cut fabric, anything to anchor myself. But each line, each fold, felt like it carried a memory of him. The heat of his hand, the sharpness in his voice, the way his eyes could make me feel both protected and completely exposed. I pressed my palms to my face, whispering, I should be afraid. I am afraid. And yet, I want him. It was dangerous, it was madness, and the thought of surrendering to it made my chest tighten, my pulse race. The phone buzzed again, his name flashing on the screen. Meet me, now, and don't let anyone see you. I swallowed hard. The rational part of me screamed, no, don't go. But the other part, the part that had already crossed invisible lines, ached to obey. I dressed quickly, pulling on a black coat and boots, my hair still damp from the rain earlier. Every step toward the street felt like walking into a storm, and that was exactly what it was. He was waiting in the alley, shadowed by the dim glow of a street lamp. I froze when I saw him, tall, imposing, wet coat clinging to his shoulders, eyes like storm clouds about to break. No one follows you, he said low, his voice almost a growl. Do you understand? I nodded, too aware of the heat in his presence, too aware of the desire threading through my fear. Good, he said. Then he reached for my hand, and my breath caught. We moved together through the empty streets. Every glance between us carried weight, every touch a promise I wasn't sure I was ready to claim, and yet I couldn't pull away. I didn't want to. Lorenzo stopped in the shadows of an abandoned plaza, scanning every corner, every alley. Tonight, you see the world I live in, he said, voice low, intimate, dangerous. And you will understand why I protect you, and why I can't let anyone touch you. I felt the pull of him, fierce and irresistible, fear and longing twisted together in my chest. I wanted to be safe, I wanted to be protected. I wanted to be his. And then, as if summoned by my thoughts, the first sign of danger appeared. A figure slipping from the shadows. Silent, deliberate, I stiffened. He turned to me, hand curling around my wrist. Stay behind me, he ordered, and I obeyed without hesitation. The shadow moved closer. Marco? No. Something worse. Something unfamiliar. Lorenzo's presence became a shield around me. His hand brushed mine briefly. Not just protection, but a claim. And in that moment I realized I wasn't just in danger. I was entwined in it. Fear and desire had become one, and I was standing on the edge of both, unable and unwilling to step back. The shadows moved faster than I could comprehend. Every step, Every creak, every whisper of the night made my heart slam against my ribs. I clutched Lorenzo's arm, feeling the tense power in his muscles. The storm coiled beneath his skin. "Stay close," he murmured, voice low, vibrating with barely contained fury. "I won't let anyone hurt you." I nodded, trembling, my chest tight with fear. And something else, something impossible to name, something that burned hotter than the danger itself. The figure emerged fully from the darkness. Marco, defiant, smirk still plastered across his face. "You think you can protect her?" He spat, his voice mocking. "I already warned her. She's mine. In your absence, DeLuca." Lorenzo's jaw clenched. Every inch of him radiated wrath. I could feel it in the air, in the tension, in the way the streetlights seemed to dim around him. "You touch her, and I promise you won't live to regret it," he said quietly, calmly, but every syllable dripped with lethal intent. Marco's smirk faltered. I swallowed hard. The power of him, the danger he exuded, it terrified me, and yet I couldn't look away. Suddenly, Marco lunged. Lorenzo moved like lightning, precise, deadly, unstoppable. I barely had time to inhale as the confrontation exploded around us. Shouts, a scuffle, the clash of bodies, the roar of his fury. And yet, through it all, his hand never left mine. Protective, possessive, claiming me in a way that made my pulse race with a mix of fear and desire. I realized, in that heart-stopping moment, I had never felt so alive. I had never felt so exposed. I had never wanted someone so completely, even as terror clawed at my ribs. By the time it was over, Marco lay defeated, fear etched across his face. Lorenzo turned to me, storm-gray eyes burning into mine, every inch of him lethal and magnetic. "You understand now?" he asked softly, yet with unyielding authority. "This world, this danger, it's ours, and you're part of it." "Part of me," I nodded, heart hammering, breath uneven. "Yes," I whispered, voice breaking. "Yes, I understand." He stepped closer, hands cradling my face, thumb brushing my trembling cheek. "I can't keep you safe, not from everything," he murmured, lips dangerously close. "But I can keep you close, and I will, always." The heat of him, the fire in his eyes, the danger that clung to every movement, it intoxicated me. Fear and desire twisted together, sharp and consuming, and I realized with a shiver I could not hide. I wanted him, every part of him. Every storm, every danger, even if it destroyed me. The alley smelled of rain and asphalt, metallic and sharp, mingling with the tension that wrapped around us like a living thing. My fingers clutched Lorenzo's arm as if it were the only anchor keeping me from floating into terror itself. Every step he took, every calculated movement, radiated danger, and I was utterly powerless against the pull of it. Marco's laugh echoed in the darkness, sharp and cruel. "You think he can protect you?" Marco spat. "You're walking into my game, little fashionista. I already warned her. And now she's mine." The words made my stomach twist, bile rising at the thought of him daring to lay claim over me. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed, and the storm behind them made the street feel smaller, suffocating, impossible to breathe in. I felt the air tighten around us, as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. "You touch her again," Lorenzo said, voice low, dangerous, each word deliberate, "and I will erase everything you've ever known. Understand?" Marco faltered, smirk cracking, but he didn't retreat. He lunged forward and everything erupted. Bodies collided. A scuffle, quick, vicious, lethal. I barely had time to step back, my breath catching in my throat. The sound of fabric ripping, a grunt of pain. The sharp slam of bodies against the cobblestones. It all blended into a terrifying symphony of violence. And yet, through the chaos, Lorenzo's hand remained firm on mine. Protective. Possessive. Claiming me in a way that made my pulse race as much as fear. I realized then, with a jolt that startled me more than the attack itself, I had never been so terrified, or so consumed with longing, in my entire life. Marco hit the ground with a thud, fear etched across his face. Lorenzo stepped back, breathing steady, hands still tingling with the energy of controlled fury. He turned to me, storm-gray eyes softening ever so slightly, yet still lethal. "You understand now?" he asked, voice quiet but commanding. "This is my world, my rules, and you are part of it." Part of me. I could barely nod. My throat was tight, my body trembling with adrenaline and something else. Something raw, something I couldn't name, something I didn't want to resist. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I understand." He stepped closer, his hands cupped my face, thumbs brushing over my trembling skin. "Do you know," he murmured almost reverently, "how dangerous you make me feel?" I shivered. Every nerve, Every pulse in my body screamed in response to him. I don't know, I breathed, voice breaking. I don't know if I'm afraid or wanting. His lips brushed my temple, a whisper of heat and claim. Both, he said, low, intimate, heavy with promise. You are both, Isabella, and that is why I cannot let you go. Not now. Not ever. The street around us seemed to melt into shadow and rain. Fear and desire collided in my chest like fire against ice. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. And yet, every part of me ached to step closer, to press into him, to surrender to the dangerous pull that bound us. Even if it destroyed me, the alley smelled of wet stone and fear, each breath sharp in my chest. My fingers clutched Lorenzo's arm, needing his strength more than I could ever admit. Every nerve in my body screamed that danger was real, imminent, and yet I couldn't pull away. I shouldn't want him here, shouldn't feel the warmth of his presence like a lifeline. And still I did. Marco's voice sliced through the night, cruel and mocking. You think he can protect you? The words made bile rise in my throat. She's mine, he spat, and nothing can change that. Lorenzo didn't flinch, his jaw tightened, eyes narrowing, the storm inside him palpable. The alley itself seemed to shrink around him, as if the world recognized the force he carried. I felt the pulse of fear in me, sharp and unrelenting, yet it mixed with something else, a trembling, fragile desire that terrified me more than the threat itself. The attack came suddenly. Bodies collided. Shadows moved faster than thought. Shouts ripped through the night. I froze, unable to process everything at once, my chest heaving, my stomach twisting. Lorenzo moved like a force of nature, precise, controlled, lethal. And yet, even in that chaos, his hand was on mine. Protective, anchoring me to reality, anchoring me to him. I felt tears prick my eyes, hot and unbidden. The fear, the adrenaline, the absolute helplessness, it all pressed down on me. I had never felt so exposed, so utterly small, yet so completely seen. Every part of me wanted to collapse, to fall into the safety of his presence, and yet every instinct screamed, you are not safe here. You are in the eye of a storm. When it was over, Marco lay defeated, groaning in pain, a shadow of arrogance gone. Lorenzo stepped back toward me, storm in his gaze fading into a softer, almost human intensity. You understand now? His voice was calm, but heavy, weighted with authority and something I couldn't name. This world, the danger, it's mine, and you're part of it. Part of me. I nodded, but my lips trembled. Yes, I understand. My voice broke in the darkness. I wanted to cling to him, and yet I feared what that closeness might awaken in me. He stepped closer, hands cradling my face. His thumbs brushed away the tears I hadn't noticed were streaming. Do you know, he murmured, voice raw and intimate, how much I feel when I see you like this? I swallowed, shivering. I don't know. I don't know if it's fear or something else. Both, he whispered. You are both, Isabella. And that is why I cannot let you go. Not now. Not ever. The night pressed against us, silent but heavy, like it knew the truth of what had passed between us. Fear and desire had merged in my chest into something unbearably sharp and consuming. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. And yet, the thought of leaving his side made my heart clench with an emptiness I couldn't bear. I was utterly caught. Not just in danger, but in the orbit of him. And I realized with a shiver of both terror and longing, I was falling into his world, into his fire, into a love that could destroy me, and I didn't want to stop. The rain began to fall softly, cold against my skin, but I barely noticed. All that existed was the tether between us, fragile, dangerous, undeniable. And in that moment, I understood the terrifying truth. I didn't just need him to protect me, I needed him to survive, and in that need, I had already surrendered. The dawn arrived gray and heavy over Milan, but sleep had abandoned me hours ago. Every sound, the drip of rain, the creak of the shutters, the distant hum of the city, felt magnified, a warning I could not ignore. I hadn't left my studio since the confrontation. I hadn't even tried. Lorenzo's presence lingered everywhere, even in his absence. Every shadow seemed to hold him. Every heartbeat echoed the memory of his hands on mine, his eyes storming over me, his promise of protection and destruction intertwined. The phone buzzed. A single message, sharp and commanding. Meet me, now, and don't let anyone follow you. My pulse spiked. Fear screamed inside me, but the pull, the dangerous, irresistible pull, was stronger. I dressed quickly, heart hammering, hands trembling, every nerve alert to danger. I knew he wouldn't come to me this time. This time, I had to go to him. The meeting place was a deserted terrace, the city stretching beneath us like a silent witness. He was already there, silhouetted against the early morning light. rain-damp coat clinging to his shoulders, hair dark and wild. When he saw me, the storm in his eyes softened just enough for me to see the man beneath the monster. But the edge never left him. "You came," he said, voice low, controlled, vibrating with tension. "I had to," I whispered, voice barely steady. "Good," he replied, stepping closer, "because danger never sleeps, and neither do I." I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to run, to hide, to stay safe. But my body refused to move. Every part of me, terrified, trembling, aching, wanted him. And I knew he felt it too. The air between us crackled with tension. Dangerous, forbidden, impossible to ignore. "Marco won't stop," he murmured, eyes locking on mine, intensity radiating from every line of his body. "But I will handle it. For you." I wanted to protest, to say I didn't need protection, that I could survive alone. But I couldn't. I wanted him, needed him, to be both my savior and my storm. He reached for me, hand brushing my cheek with a gentleness that contradicted the fire in his gaze. "Do you understand, Isabella?" he whispered. "I can't keep you safe from everything, but I can keep you close. And I will, always." I nodded, breath trembling, heart hammering. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I understand." The city below seemed to hold its breath. Fear and longing twisted in my chest, impossible to separate. I realized then, with a shiver, that I had crossed a line I could never return from. I was his, not by force, not by choice, but by the pull of something stronger than reason, stronger than fear. And I knew, even as the first signs of danger edged closer, I didn't want to escape. I didn't want to hide. I wanted him every storm, every danger, every forbidden, consuming part of him. And I was standing on the edge, ready to fall, into fire, into love, into the chaos of a world I could never leave. The city was silent beneath the storm that had followed us all night. Even the rain seemed hesitant, as if it too feared what was about to unfold. I clutched my coat tightly around me, heart hammering, mind unable to escape the memory of every moment, every touch, every whispered promise, every shadow of danger. Lorenzo was beside me, tall, unyielding, storm-gray eyes burning with a mixture of fury and pain. "I've kept you safe this far," he murmured, voice low, vibrating with controlled chaos. "But tonight, you may see what my world truly costs." The enemy emerged from the shadows. Not Marco, someone worse, someone I couldn't even name, faceless, relentless. I froze. Lorenzo's hand found mine, thumb brushing over my knuckles with a quiet, intimate claim. "Stay close," he ordered. "I won't let them take you." And yet, in the pit of my stomach, I felt the terrifying truth. No matter what he did, tonight might not end in safety. The confrontation erupted like fire, shouts, struggle, shadows moving faster than light. I could barely breathe, barely think, barely move. Every instinct screamed to run. Every heartbeat screamed to stay. Lorenzo moved like a force of nature, precise, deadly, unstoppable. But then I saw it. A momentary misstep, a vulnerability I had never seen in him. My chest tightened. The storm, the fire, the danger. It wasn't just around us. It was inside us. Time slowed. I saw the attack that no one could stop. The blow that broke everything in an instant. Lorenzo staggered, and the world fell silent except for the hammering of my own heart. "No," I whispered, voice breaking, tears streaming, but I couldn't move fast enough. I couldn't save him. He turned to me, breath ragged, eyes searching mine. "Isabella?" The word was soft, intimate, heavy with everything he could not say. And then the moment broke, fragile and devastating, leaving me clinging to nothing but memory. The enemy fled. The city returned to silence. I was left kneeling in the rain, trembling, soaked, broken. Every part of me screamed in loss. The fire, the storm, the love that had consumed me, all gone. I pressed my hand to my lips, imagining his touch one last time. "Lorenzo, I couldn't even finish the sentence. The words dissolved in tears. And yet, even in the heartbreak, I felt it. The mark of him, the echo of his presence, the truth of our love. He had changed me, burned through me, claimed me in ways no one else ever could. And even though he was gone, I would carry him. Always. The city beneath me was gray, the rain falling softly now, mourning with me. I whispered into the emptiness. "I loved you, Lorenzo. I still do. And I always will." The storm passed. The fire remained. And I realized that some loves are not meant to last. They are meant to burn, beautifully, tragically, eternally. If you felt every heartbeat, every fear, every forbidden moment with me, then don't let this story end here. Subscribe, stay with me, and journey through every storm, every love, every danger yet to come. I promise. The next story will pull at your heart even more. Click subscribe, BRD Stories Hub, and don't look away.